Hey, welcome to another episode of Klif Notes. This is Clifton Fair, and I am joined by Miss Deanna Pierce. Miss Deanna Pierce, excuse me.
No. Okay.
And I'm super excited to have her sitting on the couch with us today because you all are in for a treat. She is in the top 5% of IT professionals in cybersecurity. She's also a real estate mogul in her own respect and right. She's a beautiful woman and a fantastic daughter. I just want to welcome Miss Deanna Pierce.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I mean, you're making a transition back down from DC, back home.
I am looking forward to better weather.
I'll tell you what, since you've been here, the weather has changed. So I just want to point that out for
It has, but it's still better than 20 degrees.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll take it any day of the week. I'll take it.
We're looking to keep you down here and capture you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, I sit here and I'm humbled just by your professional success. And I know that the audience, especially that little black girl out there or that little brown girl out there, is trying to figure out how do they navigate some of the waters that you've navigated? How do they push through some of those barriers, glass ceilings and or walls?
Right.
And I'm excited to have you kind of shed some light on some of those things.
First of all, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Most important. You know, it's interesting. Born and raised in Miami, South Florida. This has always been home for me. Went to Florida A&M University up in Tallahassee. You're right. Yep. Highest of the Seven Hills. Yes. Even before it was popular to go to FAMU. But, you know, it was always interesting because Florida has always been home and it's always been that, you know, stranger danger, if you will. You know, I had scholarships to go to NYU, Spelman. My father was a Morehouse man. But it was one of those things where it was like, you don't want to go too far away from home to venture, but you want to stay close. But my choice, I went to Florida A&M University, came back home, and I just realized there were certain opportunities that I was going to have limitations to, right? Because at the time I left in 2012, the opportunities that I wanted did not exist in South Florida. So for those who are homegrown, not transplants from here, you'll hear people commonly refer to that as brain drain, right? So now we have all of these tech plugins that was not there. You know, in South Florida, for lack of better terms, it was either you're going to be a bank teller, you know, something very, you know, mid-level. You could not have told me that where I am now, being that young black girl, graduate from Miami-Jackson Senior High School, Florida A&M graduate, that the kind of opportunities that I have been exposed to existed. You mean I can have $1 million budget, $1 million contract? Right. I can work from home. I can be a people person. I can dress like this when I want to. I don't have to spend $400 a month in dry cleaning. I did not know those opportunities existed. So it took me to leave the state to kind of, if you will, gain that insight that was not here and not under the purview of the South Florida umbrella, to gain it and to realize the importance of bringing it back. So family things, other things have brought me back, but ultimately it has always been the long game to get the skill set, get the understanding, get the connections, and come home and plant those seeds here so South Florida can kind of have an environment to grow. So with Jeff Bezos recently announcing he's moving back, a lot of the Bitcoin infrastructure and all these things that you're hearing, these buzzwords in tech, I think we're on the cusp of a Silicon Valley in South Florida for those who understand it and can see the telltale signs of what infrastructure is starting to grow. You know, yeah, definitely the opportunities are there. So I think it's perfectly seasoned for the right time. Plus, I'm tired of being cold, so it's time to come home.
It's time to come home.
It's time to come home. It's time.
We'll definitely warm you up. We got a lot for you to do here, young lady.
It's time to come home. It's time to come home.
You know, I hear you pushing past some of those limiting beliefs that we as a black community may have like fallen prey to, as it's, you know, staying closer to home or not going out to those schools, whatever those schools really mean for you and your family. You know, how did you overcome like that internal or generational or familial messaging?
Having a good network of friends. Having people, you know, it's so cliche to say to think out of the box, but at some point you have to realize, well, this is what I know, and if I continue down this path, there are only so many scenarios that can ensue from that, right? And sometimes we talk about this all the time, take a leap of faith. The biggest thing for me that I had to work through in growth is you get these notions of well, what if I fail? Like, right, all the weight of the world of I don't want to misstep. But then eventually you become to a level of maturity of understanding there is beauty in falling on my face and picking myself and saying, okay, that didn't work.
Right.
Let me try this way, right? So I think once you get past that notion of that fear, that initial fear, like, so what? Like, you know, the joy of this day and era, no one's watching you anyways. Everyone's on their phone. So
self-concentration is another level.
So if you fall on your face or you're dancing, it's horrible. Nobody's watching you anyways. But it was really a good support system. Having friends and family saying, this is your life. This is your time.
Kind of like giving that back to you to encourage you.
Right. Not just the encouragement. I feel like to a certain level, you look for that buy-in and that permission, especially from parents. You know, there's so many levels of, I'm an only child, so I don't have the support of brothers and sisters. At the time, I was not married, so you don't have anyone to lean on to say, hey, if this happens and I go do my dream, can you...
You got me.
Do you have me? Right. Like, hey, if mama needs to do this, you know? And that's a real, valid, legitimate concern for a lot of people, because there's that, what we call survivor's remorse to a degree, right? Yeah. For you to make it, at what expense did that occur? And that's something that people live with. And for me, I can't speak for other people, but it was, who's going to look after my family? My mother, especially, because my father died when I was younger. But it was one of those, like, okay, what now? And it comes twofold. Then there's that pressure of, okay, now you made this leap. We don't have a plan B.
Right.
Plan A better work out.
It better work out. Absolutely.
So it's about having a good support system. And I think a lot of times just being very in touch with, if A, B, C, D doesn't work, then what? What does that look like in getting past that fear? That was the biggest hurdle.
You had to do a lot to actually get over, I would imagine, and I'm projecting this on you, so correct me if I'm wrong, maybe even that imposter syndrome as you're holding space for us, you know, I say that, using that word, with all the weight.
It is.
But having to overcome that and still grow and thrive and succeed. Like, people crumble when they're playing those low, meek roles in, you know, maybe even in a family, yet alone in the world. But you carried that, and you just got a promotion. So
it came at an expense. I'll tell you that.
Right.
don't take it lightly. It certainly came at an expense, but you know, again, it's about growth, right? You and I have had many conversations about the 20-year-old me versus the 40-year-old me. What would you reach back and say, right? And there's value add in those conversations. It's certainly just the understanding of acceptance. You know, there's a work dichotomy, and there's so many levels and layers to that. And then there's personal, right? And God forbid you ever try to merge the two. That's a whole nother, right? That's a whole nother thing. But, you know, speaking to the work aspect of it, you know, you'll hear people say that the three challenges and the three pillars are the three hurdles that Black women especially have to get under, right? There's race, there's gender, and there's social, if you will, status within those overlapping areas, right? You just have to chuck it up to thick skin. And thank God I had a very close support system. You know, my best friend has always been my biggest supporter, where even when I have those moments of self-doubt and I'm like, girl, and she was like, you forgot who you were, like, you know, your biggest hype person, right? Yeah. So it's not always going to come from a relationship, a romantic relationship. It's not always going to come from your best friend. It's not. I think at a point you just have to resolve, and that's why I said about make the peace. If this fails, what's the worst that could happen, right? You definitely have to have a mind shift of the worst case scenario. If it happens, can I make peace with that, and what's my plan B contingency? Definitely a value add. For those people who do not believe in the buy-in and the value of therapy, I say this all the time.
You heard that. Therapy works too, right?
And I know in Black culture for us, it's been taboo for so long, right?
It really has.
And justifiably so, like the balance of the stigma that comes with it. Because therapy in Black culture or minority culture has always been viewed as, I can handle it on my own. I can pray it away. Right. You know, I can stuff it away. And what you realize as you get older, trauma and triggers is not an attitude. You have traumas and triggers that are unaddressed.
That's a real thing.
No, it is. Yeah. But I think as a Black culture, if we're talking about as a culture, whether it be in the workplace, whether it be at home, whether it be internally, we don't know how to properly identify it until you get a professional help. And really, not even if you choose not to get professional help, if you don't vocalize these things to people and you say, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm drowning with this, you will never have the insight to understand that maybe they share the same views, maybe they're struggling with the same things, maybe there's value, because for so long we always feel like we need to stuff, we need to hide, we need to conceal.
You gotta keep your front all the way up.
Right, because that's what we're accustomed to. And I can tell you, whew, from personal experience,
Me too.
Raise your hand. It is so self-destructive and it's self-imploding in so many aspects. It has a rippling effect, right? Yes, I may be this in private or in personal or, in work. But you got to realize these are my human flaws. I'm aware of them. There's mindfulness with it. There's interest, that introspect of what it is.
There's strength there also, though. Right?
But it's strength, right? Yeah, because now I know the areas that I have to work on, right? And I've said this before. If I know this is my trigger area, don't touch it.
Right.
Don't walk around it.
Right.
Be cautious.
Right.
I'll work with you through it and vice versa. But until you're open to have those conversations. And for me, I think the most beneficial thing to get back to, like, from a working standpoint was there are certain biases that make the workplace difficult for Black women as a whole, right? There are not going to be a lot of women that look like you. You're not going to have a lot of allies at face value. There are certain pressures and triggers that you are going to have to deal with that other people cannot relate. So if I'm one of the only, if not few, and there is also that social dynamic of, unfortunately, which is a part of culture, a lot of people really don't know how to embrace, hey, rather than say, for example, if I'm a Black woman of culture and you're a minority of culture, rather than us be allies, some corporate structures create an environment where you feel like there is only room for one, right?
They promote that competition.
Right, and that is a whole different skill set within itself, right? So when you start talking about awareness, you have to reframe your mindset of, I'm approaching this like a problem that needs a solution. I have to curb these biases. I have to put them in check. The insecurities, that imposter syndrome that you hear a lot of people say, for cultural, for us, people of color, we understand that how hard it was to get our foot in the door. That's not the end all be all. That's step one. The maintenance.
Right.
The brand, the name recognition, the quality of delivery. Can I keep up with the pace? Can I mentally keep up with the pace? Can I continue to be innovative? Can I be stern but not condescending or angry Black woman? There are so many landmines to navigate through. And I tell people all the time, the worst thing you can do is think to suffer in silence. You have to open your mouth and speak to somebody.
Like people holding their breath, causing them to professionally.
You're going to pass the hell out.
I was going to say that.
You're going to pass the hell out.
You're going to fall right in the middle of it.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But the best advice that I can give people, by awareness and having a good central circle, you just have to realize you are not a party of one, and there is no discount. There are no points taken. It's not a discount to who you are to say that I need help. There is strength in that, right? There's strength in vulnerability. There's strength in saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me out? And I think so many times we get in that trap of, I don't want to be viewed as weak. I don't want to be viewed as a woman being emotional, but there is space for that too, right? I'm not saying it always has to be on level 10, but there's nothing wrong with saying, I need help. Can you help me with this? What's the best way to chart this path? Because a lot of times we don't do that.
Well, I hear you also saying that even at your level, top 5%, right? Even at your level, there's still space to be human while you're being successful professionally. Is that what you're saying to me?
Aspirationally. I think it really, again, I've been very fortunate. I work for a company who truly integrates and submerges the diversity and inclusion into not just policy and procedure and the sign on the door in the workplace. There's truly a space where I can say, hey, I'm feeling this.
Right.
Whether it be from ERAP programs internally, whether it be from feedback, 360 conscious feedback within the organization that really moves change to policy and procedure, there is a safe space to have those discussions. Now, I've worked in other places where that was not there. Diversity and inclusion was February the 1st,
Right.
to the end of the month,
Right.
and everything else was deal with it.
Keep it moving.
This is corporate America. You have to deal with it. And there was not a space to have that landing board. And if you did speak up and say things, for lack of better terms, it was you're calling yourself out as being a problem employee. Wow. You can't keep up. But again, it's just like every workplace is different. Right. I've been blessed. The company I'm with now, I've been there for the last going on 8 years. I've been blessed, knock on wood.
You want to shout them out? Or?
Oh, Booz Allen Hamilton, absolutely. It's been life-changing for me. It was a job that I never looked for, that I never wanted. But I ended up, and I've been there for 7 years. But they are truly a culture of, they're a consulting firm. But it's truly a culture of, if you are driven and on top of your game, it is the best environment for you to flourish, because there has not been one opportunity I've asked for. I've spoken at Afrotech, I've spoken at various engagements around the world, and they have given me that platform. And for lack of better terms, I've had girlfriends who have had a different experience where they want to use you as the black unicorn to put you out front. Right. From a marketing standpoint, but when it really comes to implementation with policy and procedure and change within the organization, it's you're on mute. Yeah. Stand over there. We gave you a corporate card. Like, what else do you want from us? Right. That hasn't been my experience. So I'd certainly say my personal growth, my professional growth is definitely been attributed to having a support system within a work environment that fosters that ground up, top down of, if there's a problem, let us know, and we're going to really do. And they truly have zero tolerance for the drama, as I call it.
I love that, because it sounds like you've been able to not only be the recipient of good support, but you also set a standard for what that looks like in your personal and professional life.
Absolutely.
And it's really shown up in not only your success, but also your happiness that you currently have.
Yeah, I mean, the work itself is stressful enough, right? I don't care what you do. I'm in cybersecurity. There is really no room for failure in that space, right? It's almost like doctors. Yeah. Not to say we don't have anyone's life in the balance, but the ramifications of when we have a bad day, it's very impactful across the board. And you're always mindful. It's always, the weight is there. But I can say the value of having a corporation for those people who are looking for jobs in that workspace. I always want to ask them, what does your work culture look like? What's your work-life balance? I don't want to hear about how PTO and unlimited PTO and all that stuff, meaning if I have an FMLA qualified event, right, how do you respond to that in management?
You just said something that's really key for the audience. Those top 2 things, maybe even 3. What are those 3 things that you would want them to actually make sure that they ask for?
I mean, definitely work-life balance is number 1, because it sounds so cliche because people have driven that in the ground. But there is something to be said when you get in any position that has a high execution, high level of results, and you really have a minimal, if no, margin of error. You want to know how a workplace rewards that. Meaning, if we just had a stellar year and we knocked it out of the park and put money on the books, the client is very happy with our performance. If I want to take a month off, a week off, are you going to look at me like I'm crazy? Right. These are questions to have. Like, how do you view PTO? What does your work-life balance look like? And I always tell people, because I've worked in legal spaces as well, although I went to law school, have a legal understanding background, and have worked in those environments, I have an investigative background, used to work for the Office of the Attorney General. The one thing that has always been consistent, look at how they handle any employee or anyone who wants to implement change. Right. What does that process look like? Are you adverse to it? Is it your way or no way?
Is there space for it?
Right. Is there space? And not just space, are you actually going to listen to me other than just be dismissive about what I'm trying to say?
Like you being a true valued team member.
A contributor.
Yes.
To moving the mark. And for me, that's always been important, because you can perform for people all day long, but you know as well as I know, some companies only see the value because the minute you stop performing, you're of no value to them.
Right. You're not bringing in revenue. You're distracted. Right. You're burned out. And those things get in the way of some of those maybe not so healthy organizations.
That burnout is real.
It is.
And what I've had to learn early on is when you have those moments, suffering in silence, what I said, there's nothing wrong with raising your hand and saying, hey, I need to step away for a minute. Like, I can't, let me step back because I really don't want to be kind of that rah-rah person. Yeah. PTO is there for a reason. Yeah. FMLA is there for a reason. And I think people always undervalue the importance of mental health. People as a culture, Black women, Black men, we always mask that as, I just got a lot going on. It is what it is. No. Let's call it what it is.
Yep.
You're burnout.
Yes.
If you don't know the signs of what that looks like, you are just going to be in that hamster wheel, and you're going to ruin everything around you. You're going to ruin job opportunities. You're going to ruin your reputation, personal relationships. So I think a lot of times this is why I say the awareness is key. To know when you've kind of hit your threshold to say, okay, I'm tapping out. I gotta unplug.
Yeah.
And it's that selfishness, like it's that balance.
But you got to have that reset in order to be just as creative, as driven, as motivated, like to actually perform.
But you have to learn it.
You do, okay.
And if you don't, because you're always in this, I gotta, women are inherently nurturers. We always talk about, and God forbid, I did never want to own up to this, and they talk about women and men from Mars. There is truth to it. I will be the first to say there is truth to it just because of the way we are wired.
Right.
Women are inherently nurturers.
Yep.
We want to fix in a different way that men fix. Like men are factual.
Right.
Like I want to fix. They don't want to care about the details.
Right.
They want to know how much it costs.
Right.
What I need to do. What I don't need to do next time.
I got some solutions.
Right.
You want them?
Right. And they're like 5-minute version. Whereas women are like, oh, I feel
Let's sit and talk
so
about
you have to learn how to navigate through that, right? Because I will tell you, corporate does not leave much room for feelings.
Right.
They are a fact-based environment. So again, navigating those waters.
Right.
Whereas if I step into a room and there are no other women of color, the immature part of me used to say, oh my God, there's no women of color. I feel inferior. Then you start to shrink into that space of, am I worthy? Should I be here? Did they make a mistake in putting me here? And when I start to understand those resources, good support system, your biggest hype friend, my best friend, biggest hype person out there. If you're fortunate enough to have a relationship with someone who breathes that life into you, then you realize you take a different set of stance on it, right? It's not about, am I the only woman of color? It's, I deserve to be here. I earned my seat at this table. I have value to bring to the table. And one good thing about women that you men don't really have that we always have a buy-in, because there's always a woman in the room who has some fly shoes, a fly bag,
immediate connection.
Or women can immediately say, girl, there's that, and there's different ways to get allies.
Right.
Some of my most influential allies and really mentors have been women who have not been of color, but understand as best as possible and have done the work on themselves and their environment to understand what it means to be an ally to a person of color, right? I don't expect you to ever understand what it is to be Black, because no one would know that, but it's about that openness. Just like I have friends of other races, I want to understand your plight. What are things that you get into? Because
what are those struggles?
What are those struggles, right? Because it's not always about my struggle. You have struggles too. It's a different struggle. But until you have that openness and can have that dialogue, your issues remain your issues and my issues remain my issues. And that's the whole point in having that openness.
You want to have that cohesion in teams.
Absolutely.
Before we go, I want to make sure that I get one, like I got to have one more nugget for you, right? I feel like I'm always pulling,
no,
right?
It's all
I
good.
eat it up, right?
I embrace the challenge. I do.
So, what's that one last thing that you would tell the young professional as they're coming through the tough times, or they're looking out into the world and they're trying to find their own respective identity or create their future? What's that thing you want to give them to focus on?
Definitely, if you take the time to know who you are, you know what value add you bring to the table, right? And that builds a sense of confidence, meaning I don't care who's in the room. I know I have this unique niche that nobody else in this room has, and you have to stand on it.
Right.
You have to be able to deliver it. And most importantly, you have to know how to articulate that to those that are in the room. Whereas there are certain things that Klif can do that I would struggle with.
Makes us individuals.
You can do fine, right? So that's where you shine. And there are certain negatives that I may have positives and vice versa. So I tell people all the time, be very in touch with what you have to offer, who you are, and who you aren't.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of times we try to be a master of all versus being a master of what God has inherently given you as a talent.
Right.
And I think the closer you get to that space, the better you are to realize I don't have to be 100% at everything. I can be 80 at this and be okay with being 20 at these other things, because this 80 is my specialty. And you focus on that, you gravitate towards that, and whatever your like wheelhouse within that close proximity and what comes of that, I tell people all the time, once you get closer to that and identify that up front, you will save a whole lot of headache and heartache out of your life.
I like shortcuts. I like the Klif Notes versions of
I like
things,
that life hacks, as they call it, the immediate life hacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I say thank you to you for actually spending some time with us today. You know, people would probably want to connect with you, and I say that understanding it and claiming it. And where would they find you if they were looking to connect with you?
So Prime Verum, Primeverum, is my independent consulting company. I am on LinkedIn. Obviously, just because of the nature of my work, I'm not real big on social media and cybersecurity. We kind of try to keep it under the radar. Yeah. But Prime Verum is my consulting firm. It's on the web. We're on Instagram as well. Okay. If anyone, I'm always open to mentoring opportunities. I do a lot of things within the community, church organizations as well, just speaking to people and highlighting their talent and kind of giving them a space to say, okay, what do you want to do? Let's trailblaze it. Let's come up with the path. Because when I was in South Florida, I didn't really have that opportunity. And I really feel like for a lot of people who are in those positions, if you're really serious about your craft, you can kind of expedite that process real quick, because there are mentors here. You just need to make yourself be known so these people can know, how to help you and the best way to make that happen.
Well, you heard it here. She's raised her hand for you folks. Make sure you reach out to her. We got Miss Deanna Pierce. She's joined us today. Thank you very much, Deanna, for being on the show. We want to say thank you to everybody else who's viewed and or listened. This has been another episode of Klif Notes. I am Clifton Fair, signing off.